let's see if this works. The latest round of Samsung updates to my phone was obnoxiously foul, and I have no idea why they do such things. And Samsung, you know, you are this close to me buying out my service contract and going with another service. It's ridiculous, so shame on you. Now that the negatives are out of the way, I am introducing you to, if you've never done so before, the glamorous life of pounding sinew. And I am out here. I actually am somewhat suspicious. I should have a smoother concrete surface, because the smoother it is, the better it is when you're laying waste to your tendons, placing them between a big hammer and cement. It's really beneficial to have a super smooth surface, because you don't want to cut any of the fibers. However, my style is not traumatic. I am not like John Henry pounding spikes on the railroad. It's more of a bouncing thing. Light concussive pounds on here, where I'm actually just kind of bouncing up and doing it a lot of times instead of blam. A lot of pollen or something out here. I'm having a hard time. Anyway, this is going to go on this bow, and you can't see it. I'm not going to step into the rain, but I took my scribing tool and I scribed a line along this edge, same as up here, symmetrical, and then a line that's almost up to this surface, but down a little bit, about one growth ring level on this elm bow. And I'm going to use that for reference, use them for reference marks to bevel this and then round it, because I do want to lighten this. It's not out of the realm of possibility to take a bow such as this, you know, a little gull wingy, or even a cupid's bow if I was to recurve it, and simulate on this stave, which is worked down to one growth ring. This is actually a stave bow, worked down to one growth ring in the heartwood. It's not out of the realm of impossibility to actually have made this from a small stave. So if it's crowned, which I'm going to crown this to reduce the draw weight, you know, once it's covered under a layer of sinew, and you're not going to see any of the parallel growth ring remains, because if you do it this way, you're going to have nice parallel lines which aren't going to violate any fibers. You know, a lot of the real bows were crowned. They were made from small staves. You can think of the people that made these things riding around on horseback vast distances. You're going to chop down a big giant tree and carry logs on their horse, or maybe more portable, you know, smaller staves. It's all good. This is the remains of 9 tendons. I'm going to use a total of 10. And whenever you reduce it, it seems like you're gaining more, but it's just kind of fluffy. There's air in here. Now, when I do my first pounding, I'm going to hang on a second. You're going to see me at work. I have an employee down there that'll take care of them. A couple walkers came in and walked the trails. Anyway, I'm going to reduce this into the sizes as you will see. Then they will be easy to reduce into the final ones that will be on this bow. These are shaped like a Y. Typically the Achilles tendon from a deer or an elk or a moose or anything, aardvark, will be shaped like a Y. And there are 3 parts. And so, we commence our pounding. And as you're doing it, rotate it around. Don't just pound it flat. The big key on this Y, the goal is to actually try to flatten it this direction when the Y is like this. Why? You shall see. Look how clever I am. I'm not blamming it, but I'm rotating it around here. Now, is there a reason why you're not sinew backing yet? Maybe just because this seems unpleasant. It's definitely not highly technological. first step, and I don't need to pound much, is to separate piece number one. You can see that this is relatively short. I'm not going to use this for sinew backing or doing wrappings. Not going to use it for bowstrings. This little short piece is best used to just simmer down to make glue, and I can remove some sheathing. This is just sheathing that goes around it. That goes into the simmer pile. Now I need to be a little more particular in pounding it, because I'm going to separate it into two Y-shaped things, and I'm rotating this around, going from end to end. And again, this doesn't require a lot of pounding. You just want to pound it enough. I'll try not to make ugly faces when I'm separating it. Oh, look at it. It popped into two Ys. This is the flat Y. This heavier one is the braided Y. Why? Because it just is, and you shall see. I can take this without really fluffing it up and do some simple separations. It's not braided, it's just, they're all kind of parallel. They just happen to form a Y, get rid of the sheathing. Set that down. I'm going to separate that further in the house and not on this damp concrete. Do a little fine work there. Remove a little bit of that stuff. This is ready to go. There's a little doohickey flange up there, but that'll come off. A little bit, and I can take that Y and just split it right down the center. The flat Y is your friend. You get nice long fibers, and it's not challenging. You don't have to unbraid it, you know, to get your fibers, so it's all good. And if you were to look closely here, you'd see that they're not fluffy, but as I separate them, they will become fluffy and easily saturated by hide glue. So I set that right there, exactly right there. Now I go to work on this one. This is braided. You can't just take it and rip it down the center. There's the technique. First part of which is pounding. And what I'm trying to do is, it's kind of vertical like this. I need to pound it. It kind of wants to do this flip-flopping, but I want to round it. It's going to shape it kind of like a tube. And then these little things right here, if you can, orient them and get them. I did it. Get them so you can flatten them out the opposite way. Concentrating on this section right here because I want to be able to do this, flex it, and hopefully it'll work out nicely. And separate it into two Ys. You have to make ugly faces to do this. Look at that. I'm separating. And where it's wide, this was the original Y. Sometimes you have to like separate these things into two, and you'll see what I mean when you become a sinew backer. There we go. There we go. Now you can separate it. I separated it into two Ys, and now I can just kind of pull it in half. Pull it apart a little bit. And this is just now parallel fibers. This is now just parallel fibers. That's just parallel fibers ready to be separated into smaller parallel fibers. Parallel fibers. I have eliminated the Ys. That is the first step. Get this again. There we go. Everything is parallel now, so it's going to be much easier. I don't have to unbraid any Ys. Now, some of you may be tempted to, car leaving, some of you may be tempted to just pound them and break them into the three parts, toss the shorty away over there to save and simmer and turn it into glue. One at a time, but I prefer to do everything kind of, you pound them all, you get them all into parallel fibers so there's no going in the house and dealing with that Y. You might be tempted to take that 1Y, the thick one that's actually braided, where you have to separate it into 2Ys and then you can split it down like a wishbone kind of thing. You might be tempted to work it with a butter knife or some prying tool. I would suggest against that because you want to pound it enough, not overly pound it so you're breaking fibers, but pound it to the point where you can separate it with your hands. And that is it. 10 tendons right here. That'll be laid on the back of this once I round the back to reduce the weight. And in many cases, I can make one of these bows and have it tillered before it even touches the string. The first part is making sure that this face shape on either side is symmetrical. They're the same dimensions here, so that's step one. The next step is create a scribing tool. And I'm going to mark some things here. I'm going to mark it first from the fade. So here's the handle, there's the fade, you know, where it goes from the handle and fades into the limbs. Then I'm going to mark the limbs in the thirds, more or less. Take this 1/2 inch as kind of your guide, scribe a 1/2 inch, so that center third is a 1/2 inch. Reduce this so it's a little narrower, scribe the tips, make it a little wider, but not so wide as it surpasses the handle mark, and then just work it down. I like farrier's rasp. I see my line on the side, I have it sideways on my bench, and I'm working it so it's not going this way and diving in too shallow here, but actually at an angle opposite on this side, and then flatten it off. If the shadows are right, the lighting is right, you can see if it's flat, or else just use flattening tool. And then once you have like 3 steps here, then taper it so it's a constant taper. And you can see after a while you're training your eye to see this nice constant taper through here. There's no bumps or anything. And if you do it symmetrically, boink, boink, following a little thicker, a little thinner yet, you have a tillered bow without touching the string. And that is my secret. And now what is your secret? Simply 3 parts. I have the center part that has a hole for a pencil, and always make sure your pencil is nice and sharp, and if you get a fuzzy line or a double line on it, sand it off and start over again. I have a notch on this thing which represents a certain minimum that I can scribe. If I need to scribe even finer, I'll use this flat surface here and not that notch, and then just slide it up there, back my pencil in so it's this side of that flat surface, and works out nicely. Okay gang, it's time to now go inside and further refine this, which will probably take another hour or so. Make sure my glue is ready for backing. It's not going to take me any time at all to round this. It's probably half an hour to work my way down to the lines, 45 minutes, and then round it. Then it's fun time. I have this weird tradition that I usually Sinew back at 11 o'clock. Bam! 11 p.m. Sinew time. I don't know why. It just works out that way. Probably because traditionally I'd start preparing my Sinew during the day, take a little break, and then I'd be ready to go at 11. It takes a certain amount of time for that hide glue, that dried hide glue, if you're using that, you know, the baggie, you buy it from Mike Yancey or a instrument supply house, to absorb cool water. You don't just put that flake stuff in the water and then heat it. You let it sit and it bubbles up. It looks like tapioca pudding, and then once all those little individual flakes have swelled up, then you can heat it and go for it. That way you don't get, you know, grit like glue in your thing. I think that's a wrap.